with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So take it away.
I'm going to come there in October. I'm headed your direction, Elizabeth. So now we got to
great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to welcome you today, and I will welcome you again in October.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. As Sarah told you already, the amazing things that have been happening around the world for ICW.
Yeah, we chatted briefly about them, and I've sort of been paying attention in the internet land of what's going on, so it's fun.
I was so stunned when we were in South Florida. I think we had 6 different countries represented just in that one location. And it really struck me this morning. I was on CUTV News in New York for half an hour. And the gentleman who was interviewing me, Jim Masters, was talking a little bit about, well, what is this ICW thing? And I said, you know, what I love so much about coaching is it's a borderless community. It's one of the few professions that really transcends any kind of geography, any particular cultural norm. Yes, we're adaptive culturally, but the language of coaching is common because it's the language of the human condition. And I think that's what makes it so exciting to me. We're never a stranger anywhere in the world when we're speaking in the way that we do for coaching and helping people maximize potential. It's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
We held that event, Elizabeth, in a wonderful place called Harold's Coffee Lounge, and in West Palm Beach. And so many people were coming through going, who are these people? What do they do? Because the influence of the positivity, and a lot of us were strangers when we first met, and, you know, immediately borderless geographically and borderless in our heart. There's just a common language, but more than language, just a common way of viewing the world and loving humanity that is fresh and generative.
Yeah, I have to say, when I've been in Portugal only for a year, and in the fall when I attended my first ICF event here, I had a similar, like, warm welcome, you're one of us experience, partially because Portuguese culture is that way, and also because it was a ICF room full of coaches, and it was sort of just instant, like, yeah, welcome.
I must tell you, that's where it's been true for me all over the world. I have that privilege as a leader in ICF of being in every continent, and that warmth of coaches, no matter where I am, always is the common denominator. That in my book, the inspiration. Even the event that Sarah and I were just at with a whole bunch of talent and organization development leaders from all over the world. When they sat down to talk to us and explore what generative coaching is for their businesses, they left with this tremendous inspiration. Like, several people said, wow, I feel like I just had an amazing coaching session. It's like, I'm thinking to myself, that's because you just did. And those were 15-minute meetings, right? And they had an opportunity to really deeply explore what was happening for them and what it is that they were wanting in their vision to have be different in their organization and the way in which coaching could address it. And all of them leaving with some clarity that, wow, what I thought was coaching maybe isn't exactly on track, and that there's so much more available, which is wonderful. Wonderful to make that contribution for people.
And that sounds very much like what I was hoping to get a chance to talk about today.
Good.
That idea of, like, what people think coaching is, particularly in, like, organizational settings, and what it actually is and how it can contribute effectively.
Yes.
And how we as coaches can talk about it effectively so that
so that all fits together, right?
Yes.
I think your last question is the important one. I often hear coaches say to me, you know, my customers or clients don't ever ask me about my ICF credential. They don't ever ask me about where I got trained. They don't ever ask me, well, that's not totally true. Sometimes they ask me about what model of coaching do I follow.
Mm.
And my, because you know me, Elizabeth, I'm a little cheeky. My little cheeky question back to them is, after you've spent thousands of hours preparing and studying and practicing and getting feedback and earning your credential, you wouldn't have bragging rights about that? And that's my point, is that this is a young profession. And the word coach, unfortunately, has been around as long as human beings have been around. So there are millions of interpretations about what that word means. So we have an obligation, a responsibility, and it's really an ethical practice as practitioners to distinguish what professional coaching is. And the reason that it's effective, and what happens when we step back from the framework as the competencies lay it out and blend unwittingly to the customer with consulting and training and mentoring and educating. Those are all fine modalities. I have no issues with them at all, and they have their time and place. But the thing that distinguishes coaching so uniquely is the quality of partnership and transparency between coach and individual receiving, whether that's an individual leader or the team. So the field of the team is the customer. It doesn't matter which one we're talking about. That ultimately, we are always there 100% on their behalf. We're not bringing our content. I had a CEO one time say to me, I only want people working with my team members who have experience, at least 10 years of experience in our industry. I didn't say anything at first. I asked him a few more questions, and we ultimately came around to the fact that, look, you and your team are going to know more about your industry than our coaches will ever catch up to, because they've never lived in your company. Your company has a tradition. It has successes, and it has a way of working called your culture, and it has norms of operating called your strategies and the goals and objectives that you've set. There is no practitioner who will ever know that better than you know it. Mm. And when's the last time, CEO, you took somebody else's advice about how to run your company?
Yeah.
I said, what you want is someone who can listen to you and help you to hear yourself and to hear your organization clearly beyond what your assumptions are about the reality of the work. Assumptive reality is the way that organizations put their head in the sand, and paradigm change comes along and they miss it. So, the classic story of the Swiss watchmakers who never saw digital coming and had their lunch eaten, right? So this is a really important distinction, that if we're not taking some time to allow for organizational leaders to appreciate that everything they're already doing is fantastic. You don't hire a coach to do what you're doing better.
Right.
It's do what you're doing in a new way that opens up different opportunities that they find useful, optimizing, effective, dare we say even innovative, breakthrough, generative, we would say. And that requires that the person who is on the beneficiary side of the coaching feel like they really are in charge, that they're having an opportunity to have somebody who is a good critical thinking partner with them. And that's the differentiation of true professional coaching from all the other modalities.
Do you ever get tired of having to be the one to like educate and tell other people what you do? I mean,
no, I don't ever get tired of it. I think it's a great question, though. I mean, I've been so the beneficiary with my own coaches over the years that I am such a better human being because I've engaged with a coach. I'm a better leader because I've engaged with a coach. And I know what's possible for organizations who step down this pathway towards building a coach-centered culture, that the dream they hold in their heart for their organization to excel and be sustaining and create livelihoods for all of the people that work for and with them, and the contribution they make to their customers and their communities. I know leaders care deeply about being purpose-driven and manifesting the mission and vision of their organization. But that only happens through people. People is how business happens. And when we forget to balance our technical skill with a competence and a passion for a relationship, that's when we get in trouble, and greed and scarcity and pushing the edges of our ethical boundaries are what start to emerge. And boy, those are tough things to turn around. And it's always going to be returning to our humanity that is the way to turn it around. So why not do it in the first place so we're not doing turnaround?
Mhm.
And
I'd love to throw in a quick thought from the summit that we were just attending in West Palm Beach, Florida. And that is that here are HR professionals and talent development officers, et cetera, and using the word coach, as Janet just said, sort of in every other sentence, like the manager would coach them to this or this person. But then when we dug deeper, they don't have necessarily coach training. The other term that was used all over the place was that approach, you're just going to ask a lot of questions. Now, just on face value, asking a lot of questions, that sounds not very intentional or thoughtful. And it sounds like, if I were the employee, like a bit of an affront. And so there was this whole piece when we were talking with potential clients about coaching and asking questions. It's actually, your assignment is not to ask questions. Your assignment is to be curious. And that if you're curious, you're in that present time with your employee and you're having that more collaborative and interesting conversation than I've got a clipboard and I'm going to ask you 10 questions.
Yeah. And you guys never roll your eyes at that. I feel like at the when people are saying, oh yeah, I coached so-and-so to this, or someone helped coach me to that, and you recognize that it's not the kind of coaching that you do and try to explain or show the difference between that and what you do. I don't know. I mean, the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because I've caught myself a couple times just kind of like, I mean, maybe rolling my eyes a little bit. Oh man, I have to explain it again. And like, and I thought I did explain it. And
All right. So now you've raised a very different idea. So let's talk about that for a second, because I think one of the things that is really important is to coach those conversations, not explain. Because we have, for so many of us in our professional lives, we've learned to execute really well. We get information that tells us what's expected. We go and do our research, we go and get our skills, and we follow the rules. We move the activity forward. And we get recognized for achieving the results. And it isn't until we're well into our professional careers, and specifically when we decide to take on a role of influence, either formal or informal. So informal in a independent contributor role or project management kind of functions, in a formal role as a people manager at whatever level in the organization. It isn't until we're in that influence capacity we realize how we do it matters.
Yeah.
So we get 360 feedback that we're rough around the edges or too aggressive or not aggressive enough, right? It could be anywhere on the spectrum. Whatever it is, we're not quite at the Goldilocks formula for whatever our role is. And so the formula in the HR world and sponsors who are smart about coaching would be to say, well, we want to get this person a coach. And so the climate inside the organization sees coaching as a pejorative or a remediation, something to help someone get over the hump that they're having, the place that they're stuck, or that is causing them to not have complete adoption by other people. When in fact, the purpose behind the coaching is to help the person set down the overused skills or the overcompensation for feeling their own sense of uncertainty and getting them back to center to who they are. So the opportunity when we hear something such as, please coach this person to their next assignment. I don't want them on the team anymore. They're trying to replace the responsibility for performance management with coaching. It doesn't work because that's not how coaching works. Coaching says, I see you as whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. You are more than this one little situation. You have much more to you. What had you not pick up this toolbox right here of knowing how to have a good collaborative conversation? And that's deeply personal inside the person. It's not something that they can go to a class and learn. It's not something that they can will their way through. They have to examine, what are the belief systems? What are the assumptions? What are the preferences? What are the biases that have me unconsciously behaving this way? And that's a very vulnerable conversation. So the value of a coaching interaction is to help restore their sense of oneness with self so that they can be more purposeful in their choosing. And coaching them by saying, don't do this, do that, isn't going to work, because it's built on a faulty premise, right? We haven't addressed what's motivating the behavior in the first place. And that's the reason it's so important that we speak to what is professional coaching and when to apply it. So let's go back to your example. You have somebody who says to you, I'd like you to coach this person up to the next responsibility or the next role. We have them on our radar as a high potential. And rather than getting put off by the coach them up, right? That's a signal to us to get deeply curious. What do you see in this person that has you recognize them as having potential to be contributing more in the organization? What's those set of skills and behaviors that you're seeing and that you value? And how do those line up with the strategy the organization has? What is it that you're wanting in this new position? And when you look at that new position in this person, where are you seeing their development? What do you want them to grow into as a result of working with a coach? And what are the things that will be supportive in the environment? Say from you, sponsor, how will you catch them in the act of using those new skills along the way? How will you engage in a partnership with that leader to support them in having the confidence to experiment and maybe not get it right every time, but to learn fast and really lean into the coaching with your full blessing? What are the things what are the projects or initiatives that they could work on that would be low stakes enough that they're not going to cause a Wall Street Journal front page, oh my gosh, a terrible thing happens, but big enough that they need to stretch into using the new skill. So you see, all of these questions are about contracting, so that the customer, who is first the organization and second the leader, fully appreciates what must be clear between us, transparent and understood about our mutual responsibility to support this person in learning through the coaching process.
When you say it like that, it sounds so like, oh yeah, of course that's what one would do.
Well, now it's on recording, so you can come back to it. And, I think the moral to the story, Elizabeth, is work less hard, be more present, and be in wonder about what is your customer wanting to accomplish. And let them speak that aloud. When we talk about building relationships with our customers, we talk about being a credible invitation. And the first step of that credible invitation is the curiosity we have with the customer to have them envision the current reality. Not just what's wrong with the current reality, which we're all so self-critical. I mean, it's extraordinary to me how much time we spend obsessing about what we're not yet. And fine, if that's where they start, here's what we're not yet. What are you? What's working? What do you value? What's the foundation that you're building upon? How does this leader fit in with that solid foundation? And what would be occurring with your customers and the health of your business if you bridge this gap you've just described? What did I just do? I moved from envisioning the current reality to what's their inspiration for the future? What matters enough for them to want to put time and energy into developing one or two or many leaders in the organization in this new way when they've had success with the old way, right? You got to build the inspiration and the motivation to take the risk to do something different. And then the last step really is, and how will you know? You got to measure. And sometimes measurement is, I'm doing a pulse check every 30 days and the employees are feeling like, wow, their bosses are really paying attention to their ideas. That's a common engagement question. But a big one, if you're really trying to create innovation. Another measurement might be that the customer net promoter score for the organization, moves 10 points. Or, we're at least equal with best in class to our industry. Now, as practitioners, we can't know what those things are. We can be informed about what possible ideas could be for measuring, but the organization's going to have their own key performance indicators, the things that are their way of knowing that they're doing what they want to be doing in the organization in terms of performance. What we can do as coaches is help them connect the dots. So if that's the measure that tells you you are winning in the marketplace the way you want to, how does that tie back to the way people behave? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. What is the mindset? What is the skill set? And what is the application of both that will be different? And when we can be in contracting, connecting the dots between those performance indicators and the way in which someone behaves, now we have a structure that everybody is accountable to for that engagement.
Yeah. Can you say more about the building inspiration and motivation piece? So you said building inspiration and motivation to do something different.
Yeah.
And that you're kind of rallying, who's ever wanting to bring in coaching to their team or organization or for themselves. And I'm curious, inspiration and motivation are like great words and great things.
Good concept, but how the heck do you do it?
Not even so much how the heck do you do it, but I think some of the very best business leaders, you might have to work quite hard to have them truly motivated and truly inspired, or
I'm going to bust your minds.
I know what you're going to say because I said work hard, but
so what's competency number 5 in the ICF framework? I'm just going to quiz you a little bit here because it's International Coaching Week.
I don't know them by their numbers.
Okay, there's 3 competencies in communicating effectively. What's the first one?
Communicating effectively?
Right, that's the third cluster. So there's setting the foundation, co-creating the relationship, communicating effectively, and then facilitating learning and results. Okay, I won't put you on the spot. It's active listening. So, when I walk into someone's office, one of the things that I'm doing when I walk into their office is I'm looking at the art on the wall. I'm looking at the artifacts on their desk. I'm looking at what is in their bookcase. I'm looking at whether or not they've created spaces in their office for their own thinking. So my point here is that I'm being curious on their behalf about what matters. And I remember very early on in my career, I was working at Charles Schwab and Company. And the chairman, Chuck Schwab, was somebody that we were asked to interview for an internal communications project. And we'd worked really hard on our interview questions, and we knew they were just absolutely fabulous, and we were going to have a great time. Like, we were super excited. We were getting 1- and 3-word answers. It was really bad. And I kind of sat back on the couch, and I looked at what Chuck was looking at. And he was looking at a series of pictures that were over my head on the wall. And when I looked up at them, I realized that they were the images of the first marketing campaigns when he was launching discount brokerage.
Okay.
And that was like West Coast-based company, not in New York City, not doing commission-based sales, not underwriting securities, just being a transaction representative on behalf of the everyday consumer. Like, this was a radical concept. And he'd come up with this idea that it would be him, and it would be him with a camera. Like, how do we take a picture of our reality and then learn to change it? My words, he doesn't say those exactly, but I just asked the question, what was the inspiration for you when you did this first campaign as the way to introduce discount brokerage to the industry? He talked for 25 minutes. He never stopped talking. So the moral to the story is we want to connect them to whatever that core purpose is of that organization. So do your homework. Before you go and talk to an organizational leader, go to the website, go to the annual report if they're a public company, go see what's out in the media, do a Google search on the name of the company, on the words that are in their vision statement. Go see, how do they show up in the world? What does your gut instinct, your intuition tell you matters to them? If they have a foundation, what are the populations that their foundation gives money to and encourages personnel in the organization to give their time and energy to? These are all going to be indicators of what they make important. And have a series of questions about that. You know, every leader has a reason why they come to work. It's not just about making money. It's not just about adding another 100,000 customers to the customer roll. They have something in their belly that says, I'm aligned with the reason this organization exists. And I work hard every day to be sure that this organization continues to exist. And so that's the conversation you want to stimulate. And then say to them, so you've asked to talk with me about bringing some coaching into your organization for your high potentials, or you'd like me to work with this executive team, or you want me to bring some skills training in here. Where does that fit in this picture you have that you're so inspired by in being in this company? And help them connect the dots. That's exactly what the sales conversation is all about. And ultimately, as they're speaking, they're closing the deal themselves. This is what I want. I have a vision for my people having a better experience in the workplace. And I'm perceiving that you are part of that solution. And as you're listening, you're going to use your direct communication, right? So first you're active listening. What are they caring about? Then your powerful questioning to keep bringing it to life. And then your direct communication to say, and so when you want your leaders to be more collaborative with each other, I'm hearing you speak to one of the things coaching does really well, which is give people back self-confidence and self-trust. And that gives them much more ease in engaging with each other as a team. So you see that communicating effectively competencies are a beautiful framework for being able to be effective in business development. How about that, Miss Elizabeth?
Jack, got it. Here's one more thing about something you said a while back. You mentioned that you said the phrase "deeply personal" and how often coaching becomes deeply personal. And I'm just wondering if that's ever scared anyone in organizational context when they're bringing coaches in and words like that start getting used, deeply personal, and I don't know what the other language might be, but I feel like people can kind of be like, oh no. And the opposite too, but I'm just, some people would really welcome it, but I'm curious.
I think it's a question of sequencing. And what I mean by that is that our reflections back to the prospective customer, if you're talking to an organizational leader or an individual client that you might bring coaching to, we're following their lead and then giving them an invitation to go one more step toward what it is they say they want. Would I open with coaching is deeply personal? Probably not. I'm going to open with a question of what is it that's calling you to consider partnering with a professional coach and to do something different in your personal or your professional life? Very matter of fact. Putting the invitation out for the client to tell me, where are they on their own self-awareness journey? What is the context that they're thinking about right now? And ultimately, that conversation is going to come around to the fact that what will happen in the dialogue between myself and them will be deeply personal. Why? Because you're making personal choices about what company you work for. You're making personal choices about how much risk you'll take. You're taking personal choices about how much contribution you want to be associated with inside of this team. You are aligning your personal values with the organizational values and saying, yeah, I believe in the core purpose of this organization. And that's a personal choice. Yes, you implement it professionally, but ultimately coaching is about the whole person. So I'm always going to come all the way around to that, but I will always do it with whatever the client's language is.
Yeah. Sounds like coaching.
Yeah. And I think that there's kind of an undercurrent here, Elizabeth, in your questions that I often hear from coaches, which is, what if I get a question I can't answer? What if a client is so cynical that they're not available for coaching? To which I say, then we haven't built enough safety. When I have someone who's pushing back of, tell me some big name person you've coached. or they'll say, how many people who are in my same role in organizations my same size have you done work with? It doesn't matter. That's outside in.
Right.
What matters is, are we having resonance in this conversation? As I've asked you questions, individual, what is the experience you're having of your own self-awareness starting to emerge? What new insights are you gaining? Because you will do the heavy lifting in the partnership. My contribution is a safe space for you to explore what matters to you most. What are the things you won't say to anybody else that are in your way of bringing your best self all the time? That's what we're up to. You have all the capacity necessary, and you are the one who is in the way of you using it all. So either we have the chemistry for you to feel safe, to take the risk, to talk about those things and figure out where you're going to get your chutzpah back, or I'm not, and there's a different coach for you. That's fine. Find the right coach, but remember, you are always going to be your best advisor, not me.
That's good.
I have a totally different thread of a question.
Okay.
Not totally different, but a little bit of a...
We're going to pivot here. I like
Yeah. Big picture, I've actually wanted to ask you this for a long time. If you could wave a magic wand in the world when it comes to the role that coaching is, I'll make it a tiny bit smaller than the world, that coaching is playing in business and in organizations. If you could make a wand and have it all sort of happening now the way you think would be most effective, what would be your wish or your dream, or how do you see it?
I love the question because I've been sitting in it for a while, and I'm arriving at a moment in my own professional life where I think I'm ready to be a messenger of what I'm about to say, and that's really the book that I'm working on that's coming out this fall called This Shift Works. And I was working on a different book altogether, and I went to a literary agent who said, no, some bigger names than you are already get their books and get Final Galley, and they're coming out, and you don't want to write that book. Well, that was kind of depressing. What it made me do was step back and say, what do I talk about all the time? What is always coming out of my mouth, no matter who I'm standing in front of, about this amazing thing we get to do called professional coaching? And it's our cornerstone principle, which you've heard me say before, Elizabeth and Sarah. I think an awful lot of coaches say, yeah, I get it. Whole, resourceful, capable, and creative. Move on. And they put their attention to the next cool tool or the next piece of research and theory that's emerging, or some model that they think is pretty slick and that their customers really like, or something that's industry specific. And I'm not dismissing those things. Those are wonderful aspects to a very robust toolkit as a professional practitioner. No question about it. But what I'm always looking for is, what's the deeper impulse? What is the common thread that makes it possible for people to stand in their full humanity without apology, in full dignity and self-respect and self-trust, and then finally be able to see other people for who they are. Instead of trying to set expectations and shapeshift, to have this chameleon, almost imposter-like process going on. Let me see, how does Elizabeth want me to be with her today? And I'll be that. And you know, the crazy thing is that everybody's doing that with each other. It's like, it's why the Dilbert cartoon strip was so popular, because we'd all seen it happen. How many times have we been in our boss's office or in a project team meeting and we'd seen that kind of posturing and positioning going on? Oh, it's exhausting. And we would get all that energy back if we could simply be at home in ourselves and be in our self-esteem and in our self-regard, and to be disciplined about staying in our center, because then we could actually see each other and we wouldn't take everything so personally. It wouldn't be carried so heavily. And of course, the consequence here, this all sounds love and light and a fabulous thing to do, but the consequences are huge. I have industry customers who have had employee deaths, who have had suicides happen, who have had customer problems because people have been competitive with each other and incivil in the workplace. And as a result, people are tired and they're at each other and they make mistakes and there are consequences to it. So to me, our work is the antidote to the toxic workplace that we all created, because we're not being responsible to our authenticity. How do we get to our authenticity? We remember. We have to remember we have everything already in us if we'll simply quiet enough to listen. We have the innate capacity for resourcefulness. We can look around us and put some things together and say, here's another option. We have the capability to be learners. We can experiment and see, 70% of that works. Now let's go fix the other 30. All of this is about creativity. We can originate brand new thinking. It may be that other animals on the planet can do that too, but we don't know that yet. Crows are pretty good, right? They have a pretty robust vocabulary. But we know human beings from neuroscience have the ability to fire off original thought. It doesn't happen when we're in protection strategy, right? When our limbic brain is activated and we are absolutely in fight or flight or deflection or freeze, we don't have access to that prefrontal cortex on all of that capacity. So to me, the thing I'm very interested in doing is democratizing coaching. ICF has always had the big, hairy, audacious goal of coaching being an integral part of society, completely embedded. And if that were really true, people would work with professional coaches far more effectively. We would see that we're at a moment in time when there's a dream we want to follow, there's something new we want to birth, and we would have a critical thinking partner who is in a peer relationship with me totally on my behalf, and we'd be ready to go. What do coaches say all the time? I want clients who are ready to work. All right, well, we have work to do to help the general public understand that what they want for, just like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, is already inside of them. We must speak about the fact that we see people as whole, resourceful, capable, and creative, and what we mean by that, and help them to take their life back and not be so powerless to the circumstances and the context around them. And some of those contexts and circumstances are horrific. Absolutely. I think about the human beings that have been involved in human trafficking, totally unbeknownst to them, out of their control. And yet every moment that they're there, they can take a breath and remember, I am not my situation. I am so much more than my situation. And the ones who have gotten away and have begun to re-emerge into their lives, that is exactly how they did it. They never forgot they matter. And to me, this is the promise that we could make to humanity through coaching, is to help people remember this and start to invite the change into their lives, be the cause of their life on purpose. That's why we named the company this way, because that's the dream and the possibility in my book. And that's why I never get tired of talking about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, and now I understand why there's zero.
You're bringing tears to my eyes, girl.
Well, I'd love to say too that the seeing the results of when people have taken on their development from a systemic point of view. We had a client that last year we just met, and then this year we've spent, Janet and team have spent 9 months with them, and to see just the difference in them, the two people that started it all for the company, and to see where they are, it's worth all of it, because the choices that they're making and the ripple effect they're having through the company is changing their, they won't have the 82% of people saying they are dissatisfied with their job, because they're creating that connectivity and community and satisfaction in the workplace. And meanwhile, their productivity and their customer service is going through the roof. So.
Can I step back to the collective piece of like the bigger picture? I just thought of this. I remember sitting in class in the Edmonds and coach training, and thinking how very individual the work of coaching is, and kind of being a little bit scared of like, oh, I don't know if and I was also feeling very compelled by coaching, like in a very deep way. Like, I want to do this. I want to like really take steps to make this part of what I'm doing. And then I had this doubt.
Being in the world.
Yeah. But then I had this doubt that like, looking at like the collective, that is it like almost is it enough to be doing this amazing work with individuals, and how will that spread, and how will that be something that changes the system, and is part of this like humanity piece of things. And you started to talk about it, more than started.
I think
also, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just gonna say, I can see it more now, like the vision of like almost like lights kind of like lighting up. But I wanted to ask more like how you see it, because often it is individual work that's happening, and the world's a big place, and there's only so many coaches out there, and
Yes, I absolutely believe that the world is ripe for many more coaches to be in the world. And I know there are people in our coaching community who feel like, oh, there's already too many coaches, I can't make a living. And that feels like a paradox that's unresolvable. And for me, there's a couple of things here, Elizabeth, and I think it begins with ourselves. I was at I give 10% of my time and energy professionally every year to nonprofit support. And I usually am working with boards or the leadership team to have them be prepared to do more and contribute more into whoever their population is. And one of those organizations is called Hedgebrook, and they are dedicated to women authoring change. So what I know is that when I have given my time to that board, and they've made choices that have led to big funders coming towards them in order to have women authors published more, distributed more, empowered more. They're going way past books into lyrics and documentaries and screenplays and all of the ways in which we use the written word for expression. That 1 hour I spend with the board touches millions of people. So for me, right, it's the multiplier effect that remembering, we must, as practitioners, remember every person, for every 1 hour that we touch a person in that week, that individual that we touched touches 16 people, and they touch another set of people. It is a multiplier effect that takes you out to 1,764
Oh dear.
by the time you get to 30 days.
Sorry, I was trying to.
She's trying to find the right slide.
1,764 by the, what were you saying?
So 1 hour with one person is 1,764 people will be touched.
It's not letting me.
Ah, I see.
And the point is that what we do in that conversation with that person changes their mindset. And they begin to interact in a different way. Maybe a little.
There it is.
Yeah. So what the graphic's representing is that we all have spheres of influence that we are interacting with. And it's easy for us as practitioners to forget it's not just the one person you're talking to. When they change their mindset, when they change their behavior, when they have more courage to take the risk, to extend themselves a little bit more, they are doing that with everyone they touch. And we touch lots of people every day. And every person we touch, they touch lots of people every day, and so on. So when we looked at this on an annualized basis, one client, if you coached only one client, you'd touch 100 million people in an annual period. Now, you might not ever see it, right? We're a little bit like cathedral builders. We're not totally connected out to the extent of the ripple, but it's happening because we're a social organism. Human beings require social interaction. So it will pay forward. How do we know this is true? Look at social media. This is what Facebook is, right? And Pinterest and Instagram, people who do not know each other. I have a friend who built a music platform, and it connects people all around the world with different instruments. Somebody will put a riff out on a trumpet, and it'll just be out on an open place on the site with this particular app. And somebody will come in with a piano and add their riff to it. And somebody from a totally other part of the world will come in with a clarinet and put their riff on it. And then somebody will come in and organize the three together and then send a note back out to the other three and say, hey, this is working pretty well. What do you think about adding, and off they're running, they're producing a whole new piece of music. So we want that kind of interactivity and collaboration. We haven't been very good at doing it until technology came along and it leveled the playing field. It didn't matter. If you had a phone and access to an internet, you would be connected to the world. Now, we don't actually know how to harness it well yet. We're sort of like, I think about in kindergarten, we played with blocks and we did finger painting and we did things in sand and we had milk and cookies, and then they gave us chalk and we bounced balls. I sort of feel like that's what we're doing on social media right now. All of those skills as kindergartners, that's what we're doing on social media. And we're starting to kind of get a sense of, wow, there's a lot of power here. And then along comes artificial intelligence and virtual reality and 3D printers. Holy Toledo. I mean, the level of creativity that's possible in a zero geography world. It's stunning. Which means at the end of the day, how do we communicate with each other? How do I let you know that I like your creative idea? How do I invite you to comment about what I'm imagining and see if there's something that we could build together? Organizations are a social system. That's a place where that can happen. Is it doing it for the social good? Some are, not all of them. And I think that's another big possibility for coaching, is to contribute to the social good, which is why I've been so passionate about the foundation of ICF and the Ignite projects that we're doing to support right now one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But ultimately, the vision is that coaches would contribute to all of the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN is engaged in. And we are, in fact, supporting UN leaders all over the world. That's been going on now for 6 years under the auspices of the foundation of ICF. So there is a very natural fit to be influencing the social good. And as an individual coach, remember that matters to you. So who are the clients that you want to work with because they have that social justice heart, right? Not all law firms do, but some do. There are some amazing companies out there vote with your feet, to work with the customers that are congruent with your belief system.
Yeah. They somehow seem to find us, the ones with congruent belief systems.
Yeah. If you're out there in your authentic presence, letting yourself be visible, and for people to have an experience of you, they'll find you. They're coming to the resonant vibration.
So there's a comment from Facebook saying, the future of social media is building communities, something coaches do naturally.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Facebook just came out with a whole new platform. And all the stuff that they're doing with iMessenger and some of the more recent changes to create private conversation, I think is kind of fascinating, right? They're trying to modulate perhaps maybe a little too much exposure and give people more authority over how they're interacting. It's not going to stop the interaction. It will deepen it. It just won't be quite as visible. But it will be visible at the level that each person is comfortable with, rather than assuming everybody wants everything out in the open. I really don't care how many times a day you use the restroom. Right. Not interesting to me. Yeah. But if you wanted to tell me 3 times a day when you made a difference in somebody's life, like a migrant at the border who's trying to seek asylum, I'm all in. I definitely want to hear those feel-good stories, and I want to know if there's something I can do to support and to contribute, because it's something I care about, right? In this way, this connectivity can be incredibly healthy, and more of us who have that orientation have an opportunity to contribute and be constructive in that way.
Janet, I have a question here as we wind up, and that is, in thinking, something you just said sparked it in my head, but thinking of how business is shifting from a hierarchical construct to a more, people will still know who the boss is, but they're looking for a more collaborative and less layered workplace. How does coaching fit into that?
I think there's a couple of ways that come to mind, and I would say this is a leading edge in coaching. A lot of organizations are moving to shared leadership, which is the next generation of matrix. 20 years ago, we had dotted line relationships in the organization. But what's happening today, because things are so complex and they are moving at such a rapid pace, no one can have all the information necessary for effective decision making. We must be collecting input from more people. And consensus is an extremely difficult way to make decisions when you have the kind of complexity and pace we're working in. So shared leadership really says, I will have my colleagues back. I will absolutely pause before I pull the trigger on a decision to ensure that I've considered everything from the other points of view. And you will know I've done that because I came to you before I started, at the seed of the idea. And we put our seeds together, and we figured out what fertilizer, and we knew what to add to the soil, and we knew exactly how much light to give it. And we agreed when we were watching it grow that it maybe needed a little bit more water. That those are collective decisions that are getting made along the process, not just setting a target and then sitting back and saying somebody else is going to do it, right? And those are all relationship skills that are necessary. And I think in this way, coaching both helps to reveal the from to that is happening as structurally we need to move to more shared leadership. And it also provides the way to stay aware. Oh, I see where our friction points are. Let's come together and sort this out so that we don't interrupt the flow that's underway. Both of those are relationship building capacities, and coaching is really well suited to that.
Yeah. Well, anything either of you would like to say as we wrap up? I just want to thank you for this really rich conversation. Elizabeth, you put some real thought into the questions, and Janet into the answers. And anything you want to, any parting thoughts as we close down here?
I want to express my gratitude. Our team here at inviteCHANGE, and Elizabeth, you took up the charge to represent Portugal and really infuse our conversation with meaningful questions these are the dialogues as practitioners that will move us all forward. Rising tide floats all boats. And I'm grateful for the opportunity and know that I'm always available for this. So let's keep our thinking caps on about how we extend that ripple effect. And so thanks for your leadership and stepping forward and inviting me to come play with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming to Portugal.
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Exactly.
See you soon, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. You're really awesome.
All right.
Everybody, this is 1.0 resource development. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.